Awesome. So good morning or afternoon or wherever you are. We are so excited to welcome you today to this amazing restorative justice training panel. So lessons and reflections on how to repair, restore, and engage for community healing in the school setting, part 1. And a reminder that we have part 2 on Friday, the 22nd. I'm Evelyn Clark, and I will be facilitating today along with Yasmina, who is our NTAC school-based lead team member. And yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and dive in today. Feel free to just give us some feedback and commentary in the chat. We love it. Thank you.
Is that me?
Oh, if you would like, or I can take on.
Oh, keep going. Sorry, I thought I was missing my cue.
No, you're good. I was just waiting. All right. So our disclaimer today is that the views today do not reflect our funders, our federal funders, SAMHSA, and that this is, make sure we want to take care of our own wellness. Some of the things could be triggering, so feel free to take a step back, as we will be having individuals share their real life experiences with restorative justice. So I'm going to share with you who we are at NTAC. So at NTAC, we are the National Training and Technical Assistance Center for Child, Youth, and Family Mental Health for the US. And we focus on serving young people and their families from ages 0 to 21, provide mental health consultation, TA, all of that. And this is our wonderful team that we get to work with. Again, I'm from Change Matrix, and we are so excited that we get to partner with amazing organizations across the US to give you what you all need. And again, our goal is for all children, youth, and adults and families with emotional or behavioral health needs can access evidence-based treatments and recovery services in a well-coordinated system of care. Awesome. So today's presenters, we have Charles Bryce from New York State. We have Javen Pitt from Washington State. Melissa Marin, sorry, I don't know what state you're in. And we have Tyus Reed in Washington State and Yasmina Lexinger in Arizona. And myself, I'm in Washington State as well. Awesome. So today's agenda, welcome. We did our welcomes. And we're going to have an overview of restorative justice today by Melissa. And this is going to be for the first hour, and then we'll take our break. And the second hour, we'll dive into our panelist Q&A, which again, you'll hear from our panelists. You'll hear about the work they're doing. You'll hear about their lived experience in this work. And then we'll have questions from all of you as participants and just a quick overview of day 2. And then we're going to give you all a survey about today's training. And I am going to pass it over to Yasmina so she can introduce Melissa.
Hi, everyone. My name is again Yasmina, and I am the School-Based Services Transformation Team Lead for the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And this event has been almost a year in the making, and it originally started when Melissa and I were partnering for a community of practice. And it was about creating trauma-informed partnerships between family partners and educators to help young adults and children living with serious mental health concerns. And during one of the sessions, Melissa led a session on restorative justice. And one of our colleagues from Families Together in New York said, we have to bring this to New York. We have to bring Melissa here. We have to spread this message. And it's my honor and privilege and a long time in the making to get to introduce Melissa. Melissa is a parent, is an educator, and an all-around amazing human. Describes herself as a former little badass, and now works with kids in person. Decided 2022 was the time to go back to in-person learning, and now is a restorative justice coordinator at a K-8 school. So Melissa, I can't wait to learn and to be and learning again with you today and to hear all your stories from the last year.
Thanks, Yasmina. I can't believe you put that in there. Yes. Thank you. And I'm excited to be here. It's been a minute since I've been with Outside Community. I've been working with these kids and their teachers and their families since August. I think even before August. So bringing in a little different perspective. For today, I'm going to do just a brief overview. You'll hear Yasmina and hopefully some of the other panelists might jump in here and there just to give us a sketch of what I'm talking about, what we're talking about when we are talking about restorative justice and restorative practice. And Carrie, you are the slide master, and I think that we can skip ahead to slide 13, which is just the what is restorative justice. Whoop, back one. Sorry, back two. Girl, go backward. I was gonna drive the slides, and then at the last minute, I was like, Carrie, you gotta drive the slides. Okay, Carrie, go go forward two more.
My controls are having a mind of their own. Two more. Here we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Now we're on the same page, right? I was like, y'all don't need a 700 slides about me, right? In general, just a couple of just other things just to help frame, right? So I've worked with kids for a really long time, in public school, outside of school, worked with families and educators. And my orientation around restorative justice really begins actually with the Insight Prison Project, and then which we could talk a little bit more about on the panel, but also then extended into my work with kids and families. And I've worked with kids for like 20 years, I want to say. So this practice is always growing. It's not static. I think it's really important to point that out at the outset, that really we're talking about a framework, a way of thinking, and not so much a to-do list, right? Step one, and now I've achieved restorative justice. It never happens that way, right? So really, like, and what you'll see here, right? What we mean when we're talking about restorative justice is really, it is a way of thinking that transfers us away from, transfers us from systems of blame, right? So like, instead of thinking about when harm is done, we're always thinking about the rule that's broken or the law that was broken. In this case, we're thinking about the harm that is done and the people impacted, right? Not so much the systems impacted, but the people impacted, right? And how that impact affects relationships. Within this frame, we're also talking about, and we're beginning to believe, right, that we are all in relationship to one another. One of the things that kids often say to me is, I don't have a relationship with so-and-so, and parents too. And I'm like, that's not true. We are in fact in relationship when we enter into any sort of compact with one another, be it, teacher student, cashier customer, et cetera, and so forth. There is a relationship, right? The depth, that's something else we could talk about another time. And so within this, right, we're also understanding that there are obligations and accountabilities to be met. And often when people hear restorative justice, they think there's no accountability. We're just saying, say you're sorry and forgive. And that is not, in fact, at all what we're talking about, right? And when we're focusing on the harm that's done, we're focusing on making things as right as they can be, right? And that piece is impossible too. As right as they can be, not replacing, not replicating, but making things as right as possible, right? And so moving away from just like thinking again about what rules were broken, what weird social rule, what rule it was, what school rule, what law, and really just kind of zooming in on that piece. We'll forward to the next slide. Right. So these are, and these are, right, like I did not create these ideas. These are many people and many practices in the making. But just to kind of synthesize, right, in any sort of restorative practice, right, which is the practice is what leads us to the outcome of justice, right? So in any practice, we're prioritizing relationship building. And when we're doing that, we are also developing trust in our communities, right? And by developing trust, we're also ensuring that there's an equity of voice. Right? I know the word equity has really been thrown around too much, but what we're talking about is that everybody's voice is heard to the extent that person needs it to be heard, right? We're also modeling empathy. This is an important piece, right? Because we assume that empathy is just something you're born with and you either do it or you don't, but it really is a practice, right? And all of this work working toward fair process, right? So that is a mouthful. So maybe just sit for a second with all of that.
Hey, Melissa, there was a really good comment in the chat from Cindy, and they said, what is fair process? And I was going to type out like this whole answer that I had, but since everyone's sitting with something, I want to jump in with a story. I love this question because I used to work at a high school, and part of my role was new teacher training and for working with kids in the classroom. And one of the activities we would do every year, I would bring in 2 paper bags. And in the first paper bag, like if there was 6 teachers, there would be 6 candy bars. And I would say, divide this amongst yourselves so that it's equal. And that was really easy. There were 6 candy bars and there were 6 teachers. And it took like 30 seconds. And then I would put the other paper bag on the table and I would say, divide this amongst yourselves so that it's fair. And inside that paper bag was just a random assortment of junk that I found from my desk. Some of it was paper clips, some of it was, and then I would put like a $15 gift card to Starbucks in there. And so you have all these people who've never met each other before trying to decide who gets the paper clips and who gets the Starbucks gift card and how on earth they're going to make that fair. And the essence of that lesson is that something that is equal doesn't necessarily mean it's fair. We're here to give our kids what they need in the moment. And if that's different than what the kid sitting next to them is getting, that's okay, because we're here to be fair. We're here to give the kids what they need. I think that was such a great question, Cindy. Thank you so much.
Well, definitely. Thank you for that. Yeah. So when we're moving away from this idea that we should only focus on remedying rules that are broken or laws that are broken, and we're thinking about what that equity of voice means, right? Equity being that we give people what they need, not that everybody gets what they want, and not that everybody gets the same thing, but that everybody gets what they need, right? Within a fair process, right, there might be a higher degree of need for the person who was harmed or the people who were harmed, and a smaller degree of need for the person or peoples who might have created harm, right? And inside of that fair process, we're making sure that the need is being met, right? Not that we are reaching towards some bizarre idea of equality, right? So thank you.
Hey, Carrie. I was going to say, hey, we're at the slides.
That was an awesome question. And thank you also for monitoring the chat. I've not been able to do that. So jump in anytime. So we have this sort of frame, right? We have a philosophy that centers harm over rules that are broken. We're working towards relationship building, trust, empathy, and fair process. But how do we do it? Next slide, please. Circles, right? Inside of a restorative process, a circle is really, it's the foundation of any practice. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides ahead. And we can just kind of keep jumping ahead, Carrie. I think to the next one, right? The inside of that encouraging equity of voice, we have really, if we're sitting in circle or we're being in circle, everyone's more or less on the same level, right? Height notwithstanding, type of chair in the room notwithstanding, right? But everybody's, you really are, you're able to hear and see each other more clearly. And it encourages more participation, right? Also encourages a little bit more stillness, a little bit more intentionality, right? And a circle really, it helps you introduce a routine, a practice. And this is how you build a community to whom people then have accountability, right? Does that make sense? So if every day, in wherever I am, a school, an organization, if I'm doing work inside with people who are imprisoned, right? If I begin everything with a circle, if I begin everything with a circle and with some basic agreements, basic values, I'm beginning to build community. So if anybody's harmed inside of that community, we know we're coming together in this shape, right? And we can move ahead.
The other thing I love
Yes.
about the circle is two things, is the routine. How many of the folks in here, you can use your reaction, you can put something in the chat. How many of you work with littles? And I'm a high school educator, so how many of you work with 10 and under? Okay, we got at least one person that listens to my opportunity to respond. All right, we got two. Oh, we've got moms here. Okay, right. So how many of you who work with littles, and dads in here, how many of you work with littles know that they thrive when there's a routine, when there's a way we do things, when this is the time we brush our teeth, when this is the time we do this and that. So one of the things I love about circles, especially with young people, is that it gives them an understanding of a process, of a routine, of how to heal from harm.
Yeah, that's right. And as adults too, adults, middle schoolers, teenagers, we require routine. Littles, that's like 10 and under. All right, and we'll just kind of blaze through these next ones, Carrie. So right, there are so many different types of circles, right? And often when we hear restorative justice, we're always moving right down to the support and conflict circles. But really, there's celebration. There's your learning, your basic learning and understanding and growing circles. There's the circle where we just build community. I did a number of those at the early part of this year with another organization where we just built community, just helped kind of bring everybody together, right? Healing circles, support circles, conflict circles, and we also have reintegration circles. Those tend to happen with people who are formerly incarcerated or were formerly inmates. And there's a difference between those designations. And there are also sentencing circles. I don't necessarily tip into the sentencing side of anything. I stay pretty far removed from the criminal justice system. But if there are people here in this room who can speak to that, more than happy to have you do that. But that's a little less of my wheelhouse. Really good facilitator knows when to stop. And we'll just kind of quick, I'm going to breeze through these. And I think that we can also make it, is this correct, Yasmina and Evelyn, that we can make the slide deck available in PDF?
Well, I hope so. You made the slide deck, so I guess I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you permission.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You opened it up.
I know. I just wanted to make quadruple sure. So our community building, right? It tends to be sort of straightforward. They're supportive. They help us build relationships, understand people's common interests and values. They really do. If you are building community in circle, it really does set the stage for collective action, and really helping folks begin to build within themselves personal and intercommunal responsibilities. My favorite example of a community building circle is the cipher. If you know anything about hip hop and early days of hip hop, you know that like all early hip hop started in a circle. It all started with folks looking at each other, spitting rhymes at each other, oftentimes dancing in circle. Like this is where this begins, right? It begins in this kind of collective practice. I see Javen's like, yeah, that's right. Right. So it's an awesome example, right? And then, you know, learning and understanding. I often tell teachers, teach in a circle if you can, right? You don't have to be hidden behind a desk all the time. Teaching in circles is awesome. And it allows everybody to kind of be on the same, more or less the same playing field. It lets you share information. You can answer questions. You can see or hear or feel folks' presence a little bit more, right? And introducing new people, absolutely do it in a circle. I always recommend. And healing and support circles, these really, right, the point being that we're trying to heal, or we're working together, right, to heal trauma and loss. And you'll see often like one of the other common themes, a common thread in all restorative practices is togetherness, right? Very much people working together, not so much people doing things to one another, right? If you're in circle, I'm not doing circle to you, we're in circle together, right? If we're in a healing circle, I'm not healing you, we're healing each other. We're supporting one another, right? And then of course, conflict circles are a little bit different. Those are the ones that folks tend to be a little bit more aware of. And that is when you are bringing people together who have been harmed and who have created harm, who are working together to make things as right as possible. And there tend to be steps that are more or less followed inside of a conflict circle. And again, it really depends on your setting and depends on your audience. But more or less, we're focusing on what happened, who is impacted, and what needs to happen in order to make things as right as possible. And so, again, that was a lot. I'm just take it in, right? Circles, in a circle, we tend to have tools, right? We use tools. Circles are often facilitated by one to three people. It really depends. And I see your question, and let's hold on to that question about circles being mediation. So in terms of tools, right, you always want to start a circle with shared agreements, shared values. A circle really becomes a ceremony in itself. You want to have a talking piece or something that lets everybody know who's talking, so that everybody else knows that they are listening and participating, right? And then you have your guide.
I use a maraca.
You use a maraca?
Yeah.
I really vacillate, you know, I was gonna say it really depends. If I am facilitating a conflict circle and it's, you know, it's something really heavy, I have a couple of rocks I bring to really sort of demonstrate, to illustrate like this is a heavy thing and this is a heavy responsibility. If it's light, I might bring like a light ball or something. It really depends. I don't have just a handful of things.
Evelyn, what do you use? I'm like, now I'm interested in people's talking pieces.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see, but this is young people at a prison here in Washington, Green Hill School. They, the Indigenous young people made this at one of their events. So this is gonna be my thing that I use. I was just trained in healing circles through NTAC for BIPOC women, and I'm so excited. But yes, this has so much meaning from the young people. So, my God.
Yeah. Right. And then so inside, so like we have like those basic tools, that's for everybody. And then folks who are facilitating, you generally have a clearer understanding of what brings everybody together. right? And you're doing a lot of work, especially if it's a conflict resolution, you're doing a lot of work on the back end to make sure that there can be a realistic plan that's developed and followed through with. Did somebody jump in? Oh, I think that might have been on my end, sorry. All right, so I'm gonna skip ahead to the next slide. Because so I've sort of covered, you know, the general ideas of circles, our general ideas of like what makes a practice, right? But there are also stages of a restorative conversation, right? And those really are like, there's the engagement piece, right? Making sure that everybody's engaged. Sometimes you can't get people engaged, which means you can't necessarily have a restorative process, right? There's reflection, so really encouraging thoughtfulness and empathy like, especially if you're in a conflict resolution circle, everybody's able to really talk about their experience. There's not a right or wrong experience. And you're really checking for understanding. Are you really hearing this? Not necessarily the part where we say like, now I need you to repeat what I just said, right? But just really checking, making sure like this is tracking. There's acknowledgement of harm done, and I'll talk a little bit about apologies in a second. We tend to have an agreement for next steps. And if you're facilitating, right, your job is then going to be to follow up to see how the process is holding, right? You never want to enter into a process and then be like, okay, peace, we did that. That was great. Let's break bread. You really want to make sure that there's follow-up, that there's check-in. It's a vital piece, right? And for yourself, if you're also as a circle participant, really making sure that you are tapping into those agreements that you made, right?
Melissa, what's
yes.
the hardest part of this process for you?
Woo, it's the follow-up.
You invited me to interrupt you, so I'm just gonna interrupt you.
Yes. For me,
that's not what I would have guessed.
It's the follow-up for sure, because there's so much heavy lifting, especially in a conflict resolution circle. There's so much heavy lifting beforehand, and then the process itself. You know, circles can be, a conflict resolution circle can be sometimes just one circle, sometimes it can be many. And so when you finally get to that place of agreement, when you get to a place of where there's a general consensus about what happened and what needs to happen next, then often I'm like, phew, okay, I'm done. And then a week later, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I need to call Yasmina and make sure that she's on her grind. Oh my goodness, like, you know, Javen fell off. How am I going to help Javen come back in? Right? That's hard. Whew, thank you for that question. I was going to make a quick note about apologies, right? Oftentimes people think restorative justice just means like saying you're sorry. And that's the last thing that it means. It's really, really important. I tell this to kids when I used to work with really young kids and their families, right? 3, 4, 5. I would often tell them, don't say sorry. Let's make things right. And then if you feel sorry, if that's something that you genuinely feel, then you can come with that later. But we need to make things right first. And so saying sorry is not it, right? Saying sorry it's the tip of the iceberg. It's the very beginning to making things right. Right? I'm sorry I did that. What can I do to make things right? How can I make things better? Right? Let me pause here for a second. Carrie, we're going to skip the next slide and then just move into the guiding questions for moving forward. Right? There are so many good references that we'll link to later. But again, like, so when we're thinking about, and I keep drilling this part home, y'all are going to be like, God, she keeps talking about harm done. But this is really, it's the piece that bolsters the philosophy, that bolsters the way of thinking, right? that we're talking about who has been harmed and what do they need, right? So we're building equity. These are our guiding questions also inside of a circle even before circle as a process is unfolding, right? Who is responsible for those needs being met, right? And then what happened to cause this situation? So many times I can't tell you, working with kids right now where they're so accustomed to being told to say sorry, to being asked, why did you do that? That they just come in and they start just motor mouthing. I didn't do this. And then what happened was they had taken my thing and he called me this too. And I'll be like, okay, cool. Slow down. What happened? Talk to me about what happened, right? This piece, it's critical because our experiences, the way that we see things, the way that we understand things are all so different. And the only way that we understand how they're different and how we are seeing things is by pausing to understand each other, right? So what happened? I don't care why you did what you did. What happened? I mean, I care, but we can talk about that later. What happened, right? And who has a stake, right? Who was affected? Another thing, again, definitely with kids and the middle schoolers I work with right now, they're so about fairness, but what they really mean is everybody gets the same thing, everybody gets treated the same, everybody hears the same thing. And so it'll be like, an argument between two kids and you'll have 10 kids trying to flood into my office to tell me all about what happened. I'm like, okay, so who was affected here? Oh no, okay, you could go ahead back to class.
The 15-person mediations that would come into my office, you have everybody all mad, just scribbling statements, and it turns out it's like one person and a hair straightener from 5th grade.
Right.
I love watching kids develop. It's so beautiful to see them trying to navigate social situations.
And they really want to. This is the piece, right? Kids really want to. Their families really want to. They really want to understand what is happening. They deserve to know all of the inner workings, all of those pieces, right? And they deserve to be heard. And sometimes they get so frustrated with me. They're like, "Oh, Melissa, we don't have time for this." I'm like, "Girl, where are you going? We have time," right? And I like to experiment with time. We'll do that in a little bit. And right, so again, but just like understanding who has a stake in what's happening, and then how to involve everybody. The question comes up. There is this question that will always come up. Y'all will ask it later. I know it, and it is, what do you do when somebody won't come into the circle? What do you do in this case, right? And before answering that, because I know it's going to come up, and I definitely want to hear from the other panelists, is what, like, on our end, working as hard as we can to bring in as many people who are impacted as possible. And it's our job, right, to help them understand what's going to happen, and to make sure they understand that their voices are going to be heard, that their experience is going to be honored, and that we're going to work as hard as we can to help make things right. Right.
Well, and I think to create safety, because so many times when we conflict resolve, it becomes more harm.
Yes. Which is why I'm never, like, teachers also currently in the school that I work in are, they're excited about restorative practices, and then they get really nervous, and sometimes they'll be the ones who bust into my office with 3 kids and they'll be like, "We need to have a circle right now." And I'm like, okay, so what I'm gonna do is ask each of you what you need. I'm gonna send 2 of you out. I'm going to figure out what's happening, right? A restorative practice should never be reactive like that, right? I should, if I'm being asked to facilitate a circle, I should know what's happening beforehand. And it is the difference, right, between punishment and discipline. It is in fact the main difference, right? Because if I'm focusing on the harm that's being done, or the negative impact, sometimes it's not even a straight up harm that you can see, there's a negative impact. If I'm focusing on that, instead of just the rule that was broken, so-and-so was running through the hall, so-and-so is chewing gum, so-and-so won't pull up their mask. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many of these I've had, conversations anyways. And I'm going, well, our rules state that if you don't have your mask up, then you get a call home. Then that's easy. I just pick up the phone and I call your mom, right? But nothing has been built there. Nothing has been made right. And in fact, no trust has been developed at all. If anything, it's become a little bit worse, because now I'm that person who's just going to call your mom every time you do something wrong, right? I'll move ahead to the next slide. Right, so our basic questions, right? These are, and I did not make these up, but our basic questions are: what happened? Or what were you thinking would happen when you did X, Y, and Z? Right? And what have you thought about since? And who was affected? How were they affected? These are hard questions to answer. So this requires a lot of critical thinking, right? And what has been the hardest part of this for you? Everyone gets to answer that question. What's been the hardest part of this for you? And what do you think needs to happen to be done to make things as right as possible? I always have these questions up. Either I'll scribble them down for them to see, or I'll have a poster. Kids know when I come, they'll be like, well, what had happened was, before I even ask the first question, like they already know. What had happened was, I'm like, great. What were you thinking about? And you can make these your own, right? Once they become sort of second nature to you, they become your own question, right? So what do you think needs to happen? What's right for you, right? You can use your own language once you become fluent in this one. And these are just your general questions. This is your basic script, how to approach. I approach things like this with my kid, with my own kid, and with students that I work with families who come in, they have a grievance. Yeah, tell me what happened. That sounds really hard. Can you talk about that? Right. Let's talk about what you think needs to happen to make things right. I see so many good comments right now. I'm like, come on, I want to be done talking about this.
Ooh, I love what Megan said, because Melissa, we have had this exact conversation before. It's hard for me because both my kids and I notice when grownups aren't following the rules, and we have to have lots of talks about that. I wish we could have more dialogue about the adults not following the rules and how that shows up for kids.
Yeah. And that's a deep one, right? And I think adults, humans, were wildly inconsistent. And that there's never an absolute. And I think that's an important piece to try to keep on, just to keep on bringing into conversations, like with your family members, with the people that you work with, and then also as well with your kids, and reminding them, right, that sometimes, yeah, adults, they're not always doing the right thing. And I think that if we take a little bit of stress off of ourselves and remember, particularly like through a restorative lens, that the idea here isn't to be perfect. It isn't to respond to every single situation in the right way or the perfect way, but it is to be able to, even if you've been reactive in the moment, to be able to sit back and reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And
Pamela also had a good question that I think some of our panelists will touch on too, with their experience. But Melissa, you can probably speak to this from like a school lens. Pamela's talking about the preconceived notions that people have about certain types of kids, or when people can read their discipline file before they even get to the circle, and how we can, the way she said it is the dice are already loaded against that person, and what can we do here?
Yes. Woo! Okay, that's also related to the first thing. So a couple of quick things. I wanted to wrap up on that last piece. So when your kids see that adults aren't being consistent, right, it's important to remind them, A, that yeah, that they make mistakes too, and that B, we're going to keep on doing what we do. We're going to do how we do. And when and if you need help, here are the trusted adults that you can go to for this help. And always asking kids, who are your trusted adults, constantly. I think for that other question that Pamela had around, or the thought really around, especially in schools when adults have access to your kids' CUME files, and they can be like, oh, well, Charles has an IEP, and that's an individualized education plan, right? He's got an IEP or a 504. Oh, it looks like he's got this designation and that. I already know what I'm going to do. One, let's be really clear that that is not a restorative practice. And so if you have people in your schools who are saying, we do restorative practices, but what we mean by that is I talk at you, I make a bunch of assumptions about you, and then I say, do you understand? That is not a restorative practice, right? I'll have teachers come up to me right this year, and to their credit, they're just learning, many of them just learning about restorative practices. So they're going to make mistakes, and we have much room for that. I'll have teachers come up to me and be like, yeah, I had a restorative chat with this student, and nothing is changing. And I'll be like, can you demonstrate the restorative chat? And it is exactly that. It is, I lecture you, I ask you, do you understand? And then I move along. And that's not what the work is, right? In your schools, there should be 1 to 2 people who are dedicated to holding circle or counseling teachers or administrators around how to approach a particular something that has negatively impacted the community, right? I have some students who cannot sit in circle. They just can't. And they've made it clear that circle is not their jam, and that they don't trust that process, and that it's not right for them in whatever ways that they make it clear, right? Without going into too much detail. And I still make it my job to ensure that their voice is heard, and to ask them to make sure that they understand that if they are the ones who have created negative impact or harm, that they have a responsibility to make that up. Just because they can't sit in circle doesn't mean that they're excluded from restorative process. They're excluded from the circle, right? They've made it clear they can't be in that community, but they're not excluded from this practice. And I think that that's another piece that, again, is hard for folks. And I don't want to necessarily like come in like Viper style and blame folks for not being able to overnight change the way that they have been taught to think since birth. We have been taught to think in terms of revenge. We've been taught to think in terms of if then, if you break this rule, then you get punished. We have been taught that discipline and punishment are the same thing, when in fact they're 2 different things, right? This takes a really long time to overcome, to get away from, right? And it's a process, right? My introduction to restorative process probably 15 years ago, and I'm still on my learning journey with it, right? But let's move ahead. There's a slide, Carrie, that says a little more history. I'm going to jump up to that, and then maybe Yasmina, if you could give me a time check, because I feel like I've been talking for 100 years.
Can I ask you have about 14 more minutes.
Can I ask one question before you go on?
Yes.
Back a few slides, the one thing that is hardest for me is that inviting to the table. Especially in Washington State, our tables are white. Our population is not white. How do we do that? Like where I live,
I think you might have cut off, and I want to ask us to write that question down so that we can address it as a panel for sure, because that's a whole thing.
Yeah, that's a session in itself, Penny, but we will as panelists, I think we can definitely touch on that because there's a variety of ways depending on your geographic region. It might be a lot different in Washington than it is. Javen's from Texas, and he just told me right before this started, there's the United States of America, and then there's the United States of Texas, and we do things a little bit differently.
Yeah. I'm from the disunited states of the Bay Area in Northern California. So we do things differently depending on the day, Lord. Tyus is like, y'all see me? All right. I want to do just a little brief history. And then I think that we can move on in. Evelyn's all excited about the Bay. So, right. Aside from sitting in circle, I'm going to essentially read from this slide, right? Indigenous folks, that is folks who are indigenous to the land on which we all live, right? Have been using what we call restorative processes forever, right? And across continents, across cultures, you see evidence of circles everywhere. I went to Ireland a couple of summers ago. By the way, go there. It's safe for Black people, I promise. So if it's safe for me, it's safe for y'all. Go. And I mean, evidence of circles, like ancient circles where people are, this is how people sit, they communicate, they make decisions, right? Right, someone's all stone. Yeah, yes, I mean, that's Stonehenge, that's right. This is how people held councils until very recently, right? This is important to note that that the way that we teach currently with students sitting in desks that all face one way, this is a relatively, if you consider time, a relatively recent development. Folks used to learn in circle. They made decisions in circle, like I said. They made community decisions in circles. Hell, even in ancient armies met in circles so that they could talk about strategies. And that's not what we're here to do. I'm not trying to mobilize no armies. I'm just saying, this is not the new concept, right? But I think when we're talking about bringing how restorative process sort of began to merge, particularly in the West or Western, Western English-speaking communities with the so-called criminal justice system, the best modern day example is found in New Zealand, right? Where Maori folk essentially were able to buck the idea that they were going to just give up their whole identity, their whole lives, and their families and their children, right? They were like, nah, that's not the one. So we'll move ahead to the next slide. Is that right? Yeah. So in the, let's see, I would say 60s, 70s, 80s, really. Maori folk were seeing that that their children were disproportionately represented in juvenile justice and in the foster care system, right? In orphanages, as they knew them. And for a variety of different reasons, right? Historically, communities of folks, indigenous communities that are conquered, that are colonized, tend to have all sorts of culture clash. So not talking about culture appropriation and reappropriation, but culture clash, where folks typically, like folks who were colonized, are continuing to buck up against the colonizers, right? And this is a whole bigger, this is a bigger lesson with a bigger historical analysis that it deserves. However, what's important to note here is that because this sort of colonial way of thinking about families and children was really imposed upon the Maori people in New Zealand, they saw their kids being taken away from them and being placed with white families. They saw their kids being taken away from them and placed in jails or juvenile camps. So much so that they also noticed that when their kids were released or came back, that they had lost even more and more of their cultural identity, more and more of their family identity, and continued towards more antisocial, disruptive, and negative behaviors, right? So they were like, wait, like our kids are being removed, they're being completely removed from themselves and from their identities. And this isn't right, right? And it's happening all over the place. It continues to happen, right? In this particular case, Maori families really organized themselves and were like, no. We need to keep our kids here. We need to keep our kids with our families. And also the colonizing government doesn't understand how the Maori family works, right? Doesn't understand that it's not a mom and a dad, that it's many, many people involved. It's a whole community involved in raising a kid. No, Hillary Clinton didn't invent that, by the way. In case anybody had any questions about that. It takes a village, not Hillary Clinton's, right? So eventually they make their inroad to social services, and they're like, look, your government needs a radical new approach. And so through this, and again, I'm giving you like such the condensed version, with some social services folks, advocates, and Maori families, the government writes and codifies, puts into law, the Children, Young Persons and Their Families Act. Not until 1989, but that's what happens. And it introduces the idea of a family group conference, right? Which, if you're a social worker, it's different than a TDM. And we'll move on to the next slide, right? The family group conference essentially exists to help families come together to get the resources that they need to help their kid, whatever kid might be in trouble, air quotes to that one, right? So it helps families figure out who needs to be involved in helping to make decisions, and helps them get the resources that are needed. Usually this coordinator was a social worker, right? I know what you're thinking. So it prepares members of the conference with what to expect, right? So similar to what a circle facilitator would do when working on a conflict circle. You might need a professional available. Maybe your kid needs a doctor. Maybe your kid needs somebody else from the community, right? Maybe there's a safety concern that needs to be addressed. So the coordinator would help with that, and then would help to explain what the relevant legal pieces were, and then leaves the room so the family can make a plan. And that is essential. That's the essential design of the family group conference, right? There's a person who helps organize that, and then they leave so the family can deal with what they need to deal with. So, if Tyus is out there breaking windows, generally, we'd be like, okay, well, he broke windows, so off to jail you go, Tyus. In this situation, it'd be like, so Tyus broke windows and we're concerned. And here are all the relevant facts. Here are all the people that you need. And now I'm going to dip out, and y'all let me know how you guys are going to make this right. How your family's going to make this right.
I really like that the family's given that agency, Melissa.
Yeah. And, like anything in an English-speaking European country or context, there's many a problem. But because this became codified into law, it found its way over here to the supposed United States, right? And then in the 80s, we started to see, a handful of folks who worked on parole boards or as parole officers be like, hey, this is a good idea. What if people were, I don't know, mending harm instead of going to jail or something to that effect? And so you see this in pockets happening here in the United States, not obviously not as much as you need to, but that becomes kind of like the thing that starts wiggling its way into the criminal justice system here in America. And then we'll skip ahead to the next slide, right? There's so many examples of this across the world. And most restorative justice and restorative practices works or context happen still within the criminal justice system. You didn't really start to see this, this approach, these lenses hit schools until like the late 90s, early aughts. And even then, this became kind of it's still contentious, mainly because some people, there are two main forks, right? There are the folks who are like, we're still working with the criminal justice system because we believe that the criminal justice system can work. And there's the fork of the folks who are like, we believe that eventually the criminal justice system will need to be dismantled. And the best way to do that is to help out our kids on the ground, right? So those are the two main forks. NTAC is not responsible for what I just said. And this says that we're going to do a turn and talk, but we're not going to do a turn and talk. I think that this is a good place to pause.
It is. You read my mind. It's like we've worked together before.
How would you know that?
What would you like to do during this pause, Melissa? Would you like to take questions? Would you like to let folks take a quick break?
I think it would be great to let folks take a quick break. Take a little bio break. Let's take 5, and then we'll come back and we'll do a 60-second pause. And I can run through these chats while we take this break. Sound good?
Yeah. And in 5 minutes, so we will come back at 3 minutes after whatever hour you're in. And the person who, Evelyn, to your question, the person that would have to play the music would be Carrie. Oh no, because now Carrie stopped sharing her screen. We'll be back in 5, and please come back because you're going to get to hear from all of our panelists. And it's going to be, now that you know what restorative justice is and where it came from, we are really excited to share our stories with you. See you in 3 minutes after the hour. Bye. Anyone would, oh yes, Megan. I almost didn't mention it because everyone's so tired of hearing me talk about that book.
No. That's amazing.
Highly recommend. We want to do more than survive. I think I read it 3 or 4 times during the pandemic. I scribbled all over it.
Awesome.
All right, y'all, we ready to go?
I think so.
Are our panelists all back? Tyus, are you there? Just so everyone knows, my school says #school's not prison. I'll send y'all the link if you're interested. I don't get any commission off of it, by the way.
You know, before we jump onto the panel, I do a thing, you know, it's not new or revolutionary, that because what comes up often in when we're talking about restorative process or restorative justice is this one. We don't have time for that, right? It's the way that we justify our reactivity because I don't have time. And so what I like to do is I like to try to make time as often as possible. And so whenever I'm gathered in any kind of grouping, if it's a teacher meeting, a staff meeting, a parent meeting, I'm meeting with kids, I ask everyone to take a 60-second pause. So this is different than a guided meditation, right? It's just 60 seconds where our hands are free. And that's it. And we just sit quietly for 60 seconds. You can have your eyes closed or open, whatever. We'll start now, and then we'll come back in. So that's just 1 minute. Just one. For some of it's really long. For some of us, it's too short. But I like to do that because we have time. It's what we have. All right, I'm going to kick it back over. Evelyn.
Thank you for that, Melissa. I feel much more regulated as well.
I'm from I'm from Union City, so I'm all about the Bay. You said too short, so I was like, blow the whistle. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. We all ready? Thank you so much, Melissa. Can we give Melissa a virtual hand clap, please? That was just phenomenal. And I know you have so much more, and we're looking forward to that as well. And I just want to say that moment was great. I did willing hands, which is something you learn in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. So your hands are positioned, your heart is open and ready. And I love this because I thought about the young people that I have worked with that needed restorative justice practices who were pushed out into. So I got them after they were pushed out when I worked with them in direct services in the prisons, and thinking about them and how their files said exactly when they were littles, right? You're looking at preschool age, the preschool to prison pipeline, like they were getting all non-restorative justice practices thrown at them, which led them into these systems that we know as today's modern day slavery. So I just so appreciate all of your work in what you're doing to help prevent that. Woo. Sorry, I'm not going to be sorry. This work is near and dear to my heart. And so, I get emotional, and that's okay. All right, guys, I'm going to kick us off. You guys all ready for our panelists? Ooh, awesome. Okay. So let's just start here with, are we gonna do carry like a special screen of the panelists? Or are we all cool like this? What do the panelists think? Can you?
We're all currently spotlit, Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
You may just change your view. If you would change your view, you could see just the panel.
Perfect. Awesome. So for again, we're gonna do a round of introductions. I'm your facilitator, and I'm going to be asking the panelists these questions. I will kick us off with introductions. I will model that. So hello, everybody. My name is Evelyn Clark. I go by she, her, and I am a change consultant and racial equity trainer with Change Matrix. And we are a partner on the NTAC Center. And on the NTAC Center, I provide technical assistance and racial equity. We are the Change Matrix is the equity team to make sure that we are providing racial equity to NTAC, along with many other partners. I am also a system survivor. So again, why this work is very near and dear to my heart. I was incarcerated from the age of 12 to 17, off and on. And with that, I recognize my privileges as being I identify as Mexican and Native, but I'm also passing. And so I saw firsthand in the system that the color of my skin got me out of a lot than the color of, my fellow Black sisters and brothers. And so that's why I use my voice to speak and to not speak on behalf, but to get them empowered so they can speak and they can have room in this system. And one word that I think when I think about restorative justice is rebirth. I just think, it's a whole new thing. It's a whole, like I mentioned before, the young people that I have served desperately needed this, did not get it. And so let's just rebirth this amazing practice. And I'm gonna pass it over to Javen so he can tell you about his amazing self.
Hi, y'all. My name is Javen. Can y'all hear me? Everybody can hear me? We're good? Okay. My name is Javen Pitt. I am, as Evelyn puts it in my bio, a community ambassador. I like that name. I ambassador community. Good, feel good about it. I work for a nonprofit organization, diversion program, where I mentor and guide young adults from 18 to 25 into a different path, giving them life skills, doing that thing of that nature. Story, real brief, real quick. Been incarcerated from the ages of 18 to 38, off and on, celebrating 5 years being free in this coming up August. Thinking of one word, new to this work. I've only been in this work 3 years, so I'm still a rookie, still a baby. Just to be honest, when I think of the word restorative justice, I think of annoyance. That's the only word I can think of is annoyance. Can y'all hear me? No? Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We got you.
Okay, cool. Some people say that they can't hear me, whatever.
No, I didn't hear the word. Was it annoyance, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Like it's annoying to you? Okay.
It's annoying. It's annoying. And I can get into that later. But yeah, that's when I think about it. So I'll just stop there.
All right, Charles.
Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, everyone. My name is Charles Rice. I am a parent advisor here at Families Together in New York State.
Hey, Charles, you're really soft for me.
All right, perfect. Let me switch over to a different mic. Everybody.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect. So again, my name is Charles Anthony Rice. I am the Hudson Regional Parent Advisor for Families Together in New York State. I too, just like my colleague Evelyn, am a system survivor, mental health, juvenile justice, alcohol and substance abuse, kinship care, you name it. And I am a product of my environment. I am a positive product of my environment, and I am proud to be from where I'm from. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. I have been doing this work for a really long time. Actually, it's been over 10 years that I've been doing this work, and I am proud to be able to give back to my community in this way. My pronouns are he, him. And when I think of the term, when I think of restorative justice, I think of opportunity. And I say opportunity because you cannot do, and I was having a great conversation with my brother Javen over here on yesterday, and you cannot have restorative justice without, it's just opportunity. So without the person actually taking advantage of that opportunity, then there is no restorative justice, right? It's just a word, it's just a space that's created without having a family or a person who has a heart to actually want to do something different. Then restorative justice is non-existent. And so I think of the word opportunity when I think of restorative justice.
Beautiful. All right, Tyus. And let's all virtually wish Tyus happy birthday. He had a birthday this past week.
Thanks, Evelyn. I appreciate that. My name is Tyus Reed. I'm the assistant director at Spark Peer Learning Center, which is a nonprofit in the eastern part of Washington. Real quick, what we do, basically, we just train youth. And I'm the assistant director, but I really see over the JR person, which is the JR portion of it, which over in Washington is our Juvenile Rehabilitation. So basically, our state. So when you get arrested as a juvenile, you go to the whatever the juvie is, and then you get sent to the state, which is like a juvenile prison basically. Now you can stay there till you're 24. I had to leave when I was 21, but so basically we train the youth in there to get ready and just learn all the I mean it's a long curriculum, but basically just to learn the stuff to get ready to take their certified peer counseling certificate training so they can apply for a job. And, you know, if they want to continue with this line of work, can be ready and go to an interview with all their credentials. And even if they don't want to continue with this line of work, you know, the stuff that's in there is it's just life. I mean, if you want to raise kids and if you want to be able to work with your coworkers, you know, you got to learn all of that stuff. So that's what we were going to do. My previous position, I was the WISE peer engagement specialist for JR with the Departments of Children, Youth, and Families. My lived experience, I mean, just from, I'm from Tacoma, Washington, south of Seattle. My lived experience, just being a youth growing up, I did juvenile life in JR. I even did a couple years in DLC after that. So yeah, so basically I'm just here. I've been doing this for like 3 years now. I've been out for 3 years. So yeah, I'm here. Evelyn was my very first peer counselor. So it's kind of like a coming around story that I'm here with you guys on this call with her. So I'm just thankful to be here. When I think of restorative, there's a lot of words that come up, and I'm sure we're gonna get into that. Just the very first thing that came up, and you know, I'm still learning and I'm still getting information and learning about the world around me. And so it might change in a couple years as I get wiser, but as I think of restorative right now, I think of just reset. And like I said, I'm sure we're gonna get into that, but just shoot, being a Black person, I think like the powers of play of basically the people who made this system did a damn good job, and we're still trying hard to there's still, the powers are still in play, and there's people that are still in those positions from way back when. And I think, you know, reset, and I think a lot of stuff has to go to even equal the playing field. So that's what I think.
Thanks, Ty.
And I'm glad to be here with you all today.
I'll go real quick. And my name's Yasmina. You heard what my role was as it relates to NTAC, but that's not actually the role that I'm joining you with today. Today, I am joining you as a crime survivor, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And one of the reasons I was so passionate about joining this panel as a panelist and not as a moderator is because my dad immigrated to this country from Haifa, Israel, after our family lost our olive groves and citizenship in 1948, before it was regranted back in 1967. And my dad came to America to build a better life, like a lot of people do. And he was murdered in New York by young men who were stealing his car. And the system put those young children in jail and thought that was justice for me. And I'm here to talk about how that wasn't justice for me, how taking the lives of 2 more children was not justice for my loss, and how restorative justice could have benefited me. This is also the first time I've ever talked about this publicly, so I'm a little bit nervous. In my professional capacity prior to joining NTAC, I was working for the government at Arizona Department of Education as the Director of School Safety and Social Wellness. So I have kind of round bit of experience. And the word that comes to my mind when I think of restorative justice is hope.
Y'all, I'm on a panel of greatness right now. I'm Melissa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm very, very glad to be here with you all. Evelyn, Charles, Javen, Tyus, I'm very, very glad that you survived and made it here, Lord. So Yasmina introduced me as a former badass, right? I was a student like many of us here in America, and definitely was on every single trajectory, right? By all math and metrics, I definitely should have been where you all have been, and narrowly escaped, right? I had a bad attitude in school. I was like smart, but I got a bad attitude, which targeted me for a lot of punishment. Definitely had a lot of suspensions in elementary school alone. So anyways, it's those things that inform and brought me to my work. As much as I hated school, I loved learning and have always, in all of my professional capacities, found my way back to working with kids and younger kids, in particular, because I recognize that, Evelyn, I think that you mentioned the preschool to prison pipeline, and Monique Morris, a professor and author, talks about the school to confinement pipeline, right? Because there's so many different ways in which folks are confined. And it's not just prison, it's not just jail. So anyhow, these things bring me here, like this, the belief, right? I guess if I was going to be a little bit more of a cliche, I would say that Whitney Houston brought me here. I really do believe that kids are the future. Like I believe in that wholeheartedly, and I believe that the ways in which we educate and discipline and help grow children inform the adults that we are and are a measure of who we are as people. So it's why I do the work that I do in schools. It's why I do the work that I do outside of schools. No, yes, Mina, goodness. Anyhow, so that's just a bit about me. I was a restorative justice consultant. I consult with agencies and individuals. Currently, I work in a TK through 8 school in San Francisco, doing this work as well as other jobs, because anybody who works in a school post-lockdown is doing 900 jobs at once. Anyways, that's enough about me. I'm happy to be here with you all.
Thank you all for your introductions. We're gonna kick it off. How does that sound, everybody?
I didn't hear your word, Melissa. I didn't hear her one word.
Oh, my word.
Yes, you're right. Go ahead.
Goodness, thank you, Pamela. My word would be, it shifts from day to day, but today would be growth. Restorative justice, restorative process is growth for me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Pamela, for that. We're going to need to recruit you for our NTech technology facilitation. Awesome. All right, guys, you ready? I'm gonna start with Javen on this question. You ready? Okay.
No.
No. You look so relaxed on your couch. I love the red pillows.
I know, right? Just
like,
relax, sit back.
That's what it's all about. All right. So
like we should have provided like virtual snacks for the group. Like go get your popcorn and sodas and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like don't be all
Cheers.
professional. Eat on the camera. Do what y'all gotta do.
Yes. Cheers, everybody. I got my coffee. All
Thank
right.
you, Cindy.
Ooh,
Cheers. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, yes. All right, here we go. Javen, so what types of successful restorative justice initiatives or activities have you witnessed in your community? If you have, I'm going to stop there. It's a two-part question.
Well, being that my community that I grew up in was Fort Worth, Texas, none. That's just my own personal. But since being here in Washington, I guess the initiatives or the practices that I see is connecting with young adults on their level, being able to hear them and not come into the community with our Superman capes on thinking that we can save them, you know, and thinking that we come to change their community, but allowing them to change themselves. That's a lot of things that when we do come into a community, we want to feel like that we have the ability to change these young adults, and we can't. They have to feel like they change themselves by us guiding them. And so the stuff that I've seen just in my own personal work is getting out, actually going to them, actually following up with what we said we were going to do, actually letting them see that their voice and the power within themselves actually matters, and that it's all about them. You know, like I'm just here just in case you need to be picked up, but it's your work. I'm here for you. I'm here for your accountability. You want to work where you want to work at. Let's start from there. You got a license. And that's the stuff that I've seen that works so far. Real quick before we finish, I like to clear up the annoyance part. The reason why I say my one word was annoyance, because everybody else seemed like they had a very, to me, because I'm like the new kid on the block looking from the outside in, it's, in my own opinion, it's a lot of talk and no action. It's a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? And it's annoying because, like, no disrespect, I love being on the panel, but I would rather spend 2 hours with my kids than being 2 hours on this panel right now. No disrespect to the panel.
And in your credit, Javen, you told us that, and I respect you for that. You said this is the only panel that I've done in a long time. So
yeah,
I mean, I appreciate that.
You know, and it's just, and you know, so funny. As we're on this panel, I got kids texting me. So if y'all see me looking down, I'm on my phone, and that's what I mean. That's what I mean about it. It's annoying because it's like, let's just get in the streets. Let's just go. Let's just get in there and do it. So I just wanted to clear that up real quick.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Do you mind if we just jump in with questions sometimes? Because I also work with young people, and the idea of restorative justice has been very strong in my mind. I have my husband and we have 10 children, and people say 10 children, but the idea is that we were given this gift. We have had he very well established here for this type of work. We try to keep people out of those. But the question is, how is it? Well, because I understand working on our various programs, but how is it that your gift, because everybody who are survivors of the horror of the system, and I have some of my kids, mostly my sons have been in and out of that system, and I find that the one thing that caused them to be restored, and they all are restored and back to their energy of really loving life and wanting to be productive again, is that they have that network that starts with the family. And we don't always, everybody have family connection, but we were fortunate to have a very close-knit family. And something about that, and you can create family with people who just are as family should be. You know, the saying, family is what family does. So it need not be bloodline family, but the idea is building that network of people around you that, you know, you could have somebody to bump off of when you start to fall down or falter. That puts you
Hey, Pamela, your audio is cutting in and out.
Oh, well, I won't talk much then, but I'm appreciating what you all are doing. And at the same time, I'm annoyed also that I can't do more, because often we have to go through all these protocols, and we have to go through all these limiting issues of how far we can go, when we know you need to go further to really help that family or keep that mother from losing her kids by her lifestyle or who she's hanging with. And sometimes there's more we can do, but we're not allowed to. And that is annoying to me.
Oh, I hear you for sure. Thank you. And actually, I think we're probably going to answer that with our next panelist, Charles, the work that you're doing and his role, because he's a parent and youth advisor in what he's doing in New York. So take us away.
Definitely. No, so one of the things that I do recognize here in New York is that there are services that provide spaces for restorative justice to take place and restorative practices to be actually put into practice. Now, one of the things I do see, however, is that there aren't a lot of places that are taking advantage of those opportunities. And that's where I feel like we're failing. Like the services are there, but there are not when something happens, the first thing that we like to do is, okay, we need to arrest and prosecute, and then we go through the loops after that. But we've already done the damage of traumatizing the individual. And then we're like, oh, well, now we need to fix it with restorative practices when we actually had the opportunity to avoid that from the beginning. Now, are there things that take place that do require, in a sense, a more severe consequence? Yes, those things happen, right? Like, there are certain things that don't deserve a smack on the wrist, but again, a lot of times we find ourselves looking at the symptom of a deeper problem and not addressing the actual issue. And that's what restorative practices give us the opportunity to do, is actually address the root issue. Again, being a young person, I actually just did the math. I went to 11 schools in my kindergarten through 12th grade. 11. I attended 11 schools in total between kindergarten and 12th grade. Now, during that time, there were a lot of things that I was doing, a lot of behavior issues. I was known as a fighter. I would fight anybody at the drop of a dime. I didn't think about it. There had to be no conversation. We were just ready to fight. Now, I say all of that to say, I found out when I was 25 years old that I was diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. I was 25 when I was diagnosed with mental health disorders. I went through all of my years in school and never was diagnosed. Nobody ever looked at the root issue of what I was actually dealing with at home, being raised by my grandmother, having my mother raise another child, and I get to see them all the time, but I don't know why she doesn't want me. These are all things that actually cause me hurt and trauma and pain, and I was taking it out. I was being physically abused. I was sexually abused. All of these things were taking place between kindergarten and my 12th grade year when I was in high school, but nobody ever addressed those issues. The only issues that were addressed was, hey, Charles keeps fighting, we have to suspend him. Charles keeps fighting, now we have to expel him. And then an incident happened where I was actually arrested at the age of 11 and did time in juvenile detention. However, from kindergarten, there were things that were taking place that could have been addressed that would have avoided that situation. And then because of that, I ended up in the system. And then they were trying to figure out later on, okay, why did he not get better? Because I never received anything while I was in there. What I did learn while I was in juvenile detention, though, is how to eat really quickly and to not let nobody take my muffin off my plate.
Yes.
And so those are the things. But again, well, as you were mentioning, Pamela, it's important that we learn the access is not the end all be all. Just because we have access to services doesn't mean that people know how to utilize them. We have to make sure that people have the knowledge of the services that are available to them within their communities, and that organizations and agencies are actually utilizing the services that are within arm's reach. And once we begin to do that, then we'll begin to see what Javen mentioned. That's why we're in these spaces, brother, so that we can have the opportunity to talk to people in these spaces so that they can begin to say, okay, I need to do more than just listen to these people. I need to actually do something about it. And that's what we're talking about. That's why I do the work that I do every day, because I know I can get put into spaces where people can hear my story and then begin to make moves rather than just being like, there's enough people talking. It's about time to do action. And now we're moving toward action when we're in spaces like that.
Charles, I don't mean to like jump over the order, but I just wanted to say that as someone who is on the end of things in New York State that were supposed to be restorative, that I experienced pain from what New York has tried to do for me to mend my harm. And I'm like, it's just what you said, just really emotional for me, because the young men who were convicted of murdering my dad, they were 14. And what were, and I've never been able to talk to them in a way that felt safe for me. I was too young to participate in the criminal proceedings, and they weren't in the state that I was living in. And you're the first person. This happened in 1992. You're the first person that I have had anything that looks like a restorative conversation with other than like form letters that I get from the victim services department, which I had to disenroll from. Because I don't know if any of y'all have ever been on a victim services list, but every time something happens to the person who you're registered as connected to, you get notified by the government. And so when a person has been sentenced to 25 years to life, can you imagine how many notifications that I've received? And then when COVID started, and it was exactly 25 years of those human beings parole, and they spent their entire childhood in jail, which did nothing to bring my dad back. He was still dead. And then they got released into society with no supports. And then COVID started, and they were in and out and in and out and in and moved all over the state of New York. And it caused me so much anxiety that the most restorative thing that I've ever done in this process was to remove myself from the victim services list, because I gave myself freedom from that. And I didn't have to watch it anymore. And I know my mom still gets the letters. So sometimes she'll tell me, but I asked her to stop telling me. And I said, like, I'm free. I am free of that. And I want those people to be free too. And so I don't like it that the government's telling me where they are. I'm sorry I jumped in, but it really spoke to me, Charles. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, don't be sorry. Thank you, Yasmina, for sharing that. And I think it's super important. I've been on many of these type of panels, and to have somebody who's actually been affected, it speaks volumes, because so many people think that, we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but that you're being soft on crime or whatever, people say about restorative justice, and it's not. It's healing. It's healing, because as Charles mentioned, he did not know about his diagnosis till he was 25. He spoke to the point that our young people of color, primarily, I will say, Black males, there's this huge stigma, and they are categorized as, aggressive, hostile, dangerous, when really they have mental health challenges. And that's a problem. And it's a problem because we see that in preschool settings with young Black children. So I'm gonna jump to Tyus with this next question. I think it's really vital to hear. We have the lived experience, but Tyus has a fresher, he has that fresh lived experience. And so I don't think the system really has gotten better since I was in it I don't even know now, I won't say, but I think it's important because, again, Tyus and Charles and Javen, I think, all have that tie of, like, there was some mental health, right? We all have mental wellness and trauma, and that wasn't addressed for them. So it led them down these different paths. So Tyus, you have lived experience, as you shared. And again, feel free to, you don't have to share what you don't want to share, but I want the panelists or the participants to hear, did you receive restorative justice based services, 4 years ago or 5 years ago now? You were in the system. And what were those called? 3. Okay, awesome. So yes, take us away.
There's a yes and no, but just a quick answer to that, mostly no. I want to give a shout out to anybody in Washington knows the My Jobs program. I forgot who they're from. That was like one of the biggest things I ever done. So mind you, I went to jail 17, just turned 17 actually, and then got out when I was 22. I never got a job. Actually, my peer council job was my first job ever, that when I got out ever in life, besides working in the kitchen in jail. But, they taught me how to, we did mock interviews. We did, resume writing, cover letter writing, practices like that. Real life stuff that got me prepared for real life. And, I used my Jobs program, my Jobs resume that I created in jail for my first job. So, that was like, wow, I'm actually using something that I did while I was in jail in my real life now, and it's a positive thing. So yeah, that I mean, I could nitpick. I did like I said, I did juvenile life, so there's a long, you know, it's long. But I could nitpick the good stuff. But I mean, if you want to just talk about a majority percentage, I mean, no. And I was gonna say it on the last question. That's really you know, we'll get into it, I'm sure, more conversation, but a lot of the time, everybody, you're gonna hear me talk about JR and talk about the youth that are locked up, because, you know, that's just where I come from, and that's that's what I feel like I could contribute to this panel, you know, and I have a good perspective on that. And when you have those youth there, and I know, you know, not having them there, it ain't, you know, there's more to that, but I mean, every call I'm on, I always hear about these behavioral health organizations, like the outpatient ones, that are like, you know, we got to get the youth in. We got this amount of youth, and we're losing them. We can't keep youth. We can't get them in. We can't get them in. But I mean, and I mean, you know, situations, we made a mistake, and we have to do the time for our mistake. But you got us here. I mean, you guys are in a position where you have us actually here. You have us here. And I mean, you know, we'll all be realistic. We know stuff gets into the institutions, but for the most part, we're all clear-headed, drug-free, social media free. You know, we still listen to the music, and I'll get into that. But, you know, it's not like you can go act, you could listen to a shoot 'em up song and go do it because you're in jail. So it's actually you have these youth here, and we're spending all this time. And like Yasmina said, I mean, a lot of the times, and I don't know, I just know Washington State juvenile, and but it sounds like it's pretty much just widespread nationally that they're not doing nothing with our time there. And I don't know, I have a lot of things to say about that. I mean, if we don't go to jail, a lot of people don't get paid, man. A lot of people don't got jobs, and a lot of insurance companies don't get paid. So there's that. And you know, we're just sitting in there, and we gotta use that time wisely. So I know I'm kind of getting off, but to answer your question, I mean, just know it was really, I had to figure it out by myself. And when I went to prison, to the adult prison, I was there with a bunch of old dudes or older cats. And I mean, that's where I learned the most from anything, any program at the juvenile ever taught me, any counselor ever taught me well, not you, but you weren't my counselor at the state, but any counselor at the state that I was at ever taught me, man, these dudes that, you know, most of them lifers, you know, I was celled up with a lot of lifers because of the serious of my charge. And you know, they were just telling me like the real. I mean, dudes that you would never even think would talk to me, man. Like dudes that, you know, by the time back then when I was gangbanging rivals, I mean, skinheads, I mean, listen, from all walks of life. And I learned stuff from everybody. And basically, yeah, I know I'm getting off, but basically, yeah, I found my journey, and I learned from my own journey, but I still have a problem with that because that was mine, and I was in there with a bunch of cats that didn't happen to. And maybe, like, you know, we're all different, and maybe they really needed like somebody to sit them down and really be on them and work with them. And I mean, and it wasn't all, as you know, Evelyn. Listen, a little story, when Evelyn first tried to talk to me, I wasn't even hearing it. She tried to talk to me, I was fresh 17, just got in jail, and I wasn't even hearing it. I wasn't hearing it for a long time, actually. So, you know, she could talk to that. She was persistent with me, and that's what it is. And you know, when you got those kids down there, you gotta try, and you gotta put more stuff. The best thing I could say to give to you guys is that wherever state you go to, if you could lobby for anything, or if you're in the position to control this stuff, is that we need more things in there to get them ready, to get us ready to go out there, like the My Draws program. Because really, and it makes sense, because institutions' number one thing is safety, but really what they focus on, basically the whole thing is about your behavior in here. You know, we don't want you talking back to our staff. We don't want you getting crazy, slamming doors. We want you, and then you get rewarded. You whatever where you're at. We have level systems where you get a TV in your room if you're good for a certain amount of days. But it's really not. I mean, we're teenagers about to get out, and I got out 22 with a resume and stuff like that. I didn't know how to make a bank account. I didn't know my social security number. I didn't know where my birth certificate was at. I didn't know how to apply for an apartment. I didn't know how to do none of that real stuff. And for a lot of dudes, if you're institutionalized, you get 3 meals a day brought to you. You get a cell for free. I mean, that's way easier than having to live out here with what we got going on with the rent and just you guys know we all are out here. So you guys know how what's going on out here. So a lot of people's mindsets, they're like, man, this is easier. I'd rather just stay in here, get 3 meals, fight a couple guys, and watch TV. And then, and it's sad. And I've seen it, and I seen it. And that's that more than anything, any program I learned. That's what really I seen. You know, dudes that were way older than me, with mindsets younger than me, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna be like that. So.
Yeah.
And the quick answer, no and yes. And we need to do more of those programs to get ready for youth, to get ready to transition youth to the real world and to be adults. Other people my age, my peers, got to go through high school. They got to probably do internships at their parents, friends, companies, or whatever, go to college, get good information from the professors about life and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we made a mistake. We're in jail. But if the plan, you know, is rehabilitation and to be successful individuals upon release, which I could argue against that. I think it's really just captivity and being good for while you're here. But if the plan is to rehabilitate us and to get us ready for the real world, then, you know, they got to put more emphasis on what you're going to do when you get out. So that's my long answer.
Yeah.
So you know, I got to jump in, Evelyn. You know, I got to jump in because I'm over here. I'm listening to you, Tyus. You know, like I said, I work in schools primarily, right, for my job. And what were you just talking about? We don't want kids to get out of line. We want you to behave. We want you to be good. We have tiered systems. If you do this right, then you get this. You're talking about school. You are legitimately talking about school. And, you know, and this is where it gets a little murky, right? There's a place for some of this stuff, right? Yeah. And what Charles was speaking to about like acting out because as a direct result of X, Y, and Z traumas, right? This is most of our kids, particularly in public schools, right? This is the way that, and I guess what I'm saying is that these are the conflicts, right? We have hella folks who are deeply traumatized from a young age, and trauma comes from everywhere. Let's also really acknowledge that we're still living in a pandemic and coming off of 2 years of a lockdown, right? And what that does to people. You bring all these little folks into school, and the expectation is, and I call folks little folks until they're about 20, because I'm 43, so I feel like I earned it, right? I'm kidding. But this is what we're talking about. We bring all these kids into school, and we say, you got to sit down for X amount of time. You need to behave. Behaving looks like this, it sounds like this, and it feels like this. And if we're not doing all of these things, then you're not behaving. If you're not behaving, you're not worthy of your, you know, I just basically like laid down the law this year, like you can't take kids free play, right? But like, you're not worthy of this, that, and the other thing. All of these things really combine. It's why it's so important to bring and to really just like move forward with this method of thinking, with this philosophy, excuse me. We work, you know, in my school and in many public schools, we work with systems. We work, and not because we want to, right? We have to work with DCFS, Department of Children, Family and Services, right? We have to work with the Department of Children and Youth Services. We have to work with all types of social workers by proxy of our relationship to children and to their families and to what's happening, what children often talk to us about, disclose to us. Social workers will come in and be like, well, were they at school? Oh, they were tardy. Well, then, and they'll refer them to a student attendance review board, which sets up targets their families for more punishment from the state. Like all of these things are so intertwined. And when we're not coming from a what happened, what is happening point of view, when we're not looking and recognizing that everybody learns differently, that our learning modalities are they differ from one place to another, and when we're not reconciling with the fact that education itself really becomes an offshoot of this same complex that you all have had contact with. We're not reconciling with these pieces, when we're not reconciling with the, forgive me, NTAC has nothing to do with what I'm about to say, but the extremely white supremacist indoctrination that public schools existed for, that social work and social welfare came from, were built from. If we are not reconciling these things, we replicate them. Right. And the idea that we can possibly continue to replicate the same system and somehow change it, the math isn't mathing. It doesn't quite work. You know, I always say, like, I was like a skip and a jump away from being in severe confinement. Right. I was definitely pushed out of many classes. The students that I work with are already, their teachers are already, it's the thing that sucks the most about the knowledge of the so-called school to prison pipeline, right? Because now teachers are able to say, oh, you know, there's John, he's definitely headed for the pipeline. Like, they just gave up, right? And so I think, you know, to just kind of like to double and triple down on everything all y'all are saying is like the need for these basic skills, the need for us to see people as basic human beings is, you can't underestimate. It's critical.
Yes.
You know, it's so funny we say that because, so, you know, Tyus, how old are you again?
Just turned 25.
25. I got out of prison at 38, 37. And I was in Texas. I spent 4 years in slavery. If any of y'all seen the movie Just Mercy, that's still Texas. They still got Boss Hogg on horses with 30-06s, while you on what they call a whole squad chained to another man at 4 a.m. in the morning, breaking up the dirt, because that's the mentality. It's over 1,000 cities in Texas. And if Texas prison system was a city ranked in that 1,000, it'd be ranked number 17. It's over 200,000 men in Texas alone locked up. Still going through that stuff, still going through, and there's no minimum camps, there's no hierarchy. There is, you're going to do hard time wherever you're at. And when I got out of prison in 2017, I was only in prison for 4 years, but for that 4 years, I realized how much I lost and got out, and the world was moving fast. And there were programs, but the programs weren't created to basically rehabilitate you. Prison programs are created to have you basically come back, because prison programs, their facilitators are people who don't even care about whether or not you get facilitated or not. They're just there for a paycheck. And a lot of times the inmates are programmed to go to these programs just to build their parole package so that they can get out of prison and never get rehabilitated. And so people are thinking, well, they got programs in prison. They do, but they suck. Because, no disrespect, they're filled with people who don't care. They're filled with white people who don't even want to see you get out of prison, and it doesn't even matter. So you're in prison and you still have you got to go to the bathroom. In Texas, you have to walk on certain sides of the line. You can't walk in. In Texas, you're dressed in all white and the guards are in all gray. In Texas, you get you get your 3 meals. If you don't have food in prison, there's men who are degraded to having to wash another man's clothes just to get a soup to eat past 3 o'clock, because your last meal is at 3 p.m. Your first meal is at 3 a.m. Your lunch is at 10:30. The system is so crazy just in the South alone, and it spreads out, that like this restorative justice thing that we think about is that we need to start restoring people back, not to just the families, but back to themselves. There's literally a trash can that when you get out of Huntsville in Texas, it's called the Bible trash can. People literally will spend their whole entire prison stay reading the Bible, and the day they get out of prison, they will drop that Bible in their trash can, and the prison will recycle them. You get out and there's nowhere to go. You're left to having to do EBTs. You're left to having to do, as we call in Washington, Apple Health. You're left with all these things, and then you be like, well, I don't know where to go. Well, find a job. I can't find a job. I'm a felon. We'll find somewhere to sleep. I can't find an apartment because now apartment complexes are making sure if you're a felon or not, or if you even have credit. I can't get out of prison with a 400 credit score and I can't get an apartment complex. And so it's repetitive. The circle is repetitive. But not only that, you're getting constantly beat up mentally in prison. These men, I know a man who's been in prison since 1987. LL Cool J just dropped his first CD with the big chain and the Kango. He got out in 2017, 30 years, and still didn't know how to use a phone. Still, he watched cell phones grow. Man, Mr. Pitt, Pitt, how do you use a cell phone? How do you do a resume? How you do all this? You know what I'm saying? He said 25, you've been out, what, a couple of years? 22, didn't know how to use a resume. Imagine being in your 50s, not knowing how to do a resume because your whole life, and then in Texas prisons, I don't know how it is in Washington, if you're not gang affiliated, you have the works. So you gotta go in choosing a gang, whether Blood, Crip, Mexican gang, Aryan Nations. It was the hardest 4 years for me because I didn't want to do none of that. So I could never sit at a regular table my 4 years and eat just the food in my locker because the tables were gang affiliated. Everything was gang affiliated. If you're not doing this, and then it's like there's that code. You don't do nothing for the grays. It's everything in the white. And when you get out and you see these things, and then people want people with lived experience, but then, we want to hire you for lived experience and this and this and that. And my mentality is, if you want to hire me for paid my lived experience, you need to pay me the same way you pay a doctor with a PhD, because I have the same degree, except for my degree is in lived experience. My degree is in walking these streets, understanding that there's a kid over there in that corner that is dying, and there's nobody but me, people like me, that can save him, because I know what it is to not eat. I know what it is to live on the streets. I know what it is to eat out of garbage can. If you want to pay me with my lived experience, I need a PhD paper. I need $200,000 a year then, because I can get them. Charles can get them. Tysus can get them. People with lived experience can get them. Instead of sitting and doing all of that, it's like, this is how we do. Every day I come home with 25 different personalities in my head. I come home with all of these kids because every day I'm eating their souls. Every day I'm eating everything that they're going through in life. Every day I'm doing all of that. We do that. And it's like this restorative justice, it's like we have to get to a point to where it's about them. It's about bringing back to them these streets. The streets are undefeated. And if you don't know these streets, they're going to die every day. Yes. Just like say, the internet is undefeated, the streets is undefeated. They never lose at all.
Yes.
You took us to church, Javen.
Yes.
So good. So much that we are nudging up on time.
My bad.
That's all right. It was great. It was totally worth it.
It was
no regrets.
Yes. Thank you all so much.
That's why we're here.
Yes. I can't even begin to tell you everything that you all said and you all are doing. We're going to leave this with hope, because we want, although we know this stuff is really heavy, it hasn't changed. It's slowly, the more that we invest in people of color who have been through these things, who have our PhDs and lived experience, and pay them correctly and do all these things,
that's how we're going to dismantle this white supremacy that we're all talking about. And I have homework for you all. I dropped it in the chat. If you didn't get it, please email me, eclark@changematrix.org. Please watch Teach Us All. It will show you everything that everyone talked about, how the school education system in America has been built on white supremacy, has been made to push youth of color out, and how whiteness culture, which is that, actually affects the white kids too. So we need to, let's use that, because we all know America, when we hear about white kids getting pushed out, they want to change. But think about that. So watch this documentary. Please email me your questions. Day 2 is going to be phenomenal. We're going to watch a video on restorative justice, how someone has implemented it. We're going to dive in again with our amazing panelists. You're going to hear more from Yasmina's heart and, her being on the other side of that. And yeah, it's going to be great. So Friday, 9:00 a.m. Pacific time, 12 Eastern. I don't know anything in the middle. Please Google it. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for your grace and for your patience.